Hey everyone, we're at the Corsair suite now at CES 2019, showing two of the new cases. There's also a power supply we'll mention kind of briefly at the end of the video, but focusing on the cases, budget class has been a primary point this year we saw Cooler Master had a couple new budget cases. There are several others we'll be looking at later in the show. So it's been a big driver for case manufacturers, and Corsair wants to be part of that. They've got a refreshed 275R now called the 275Q, and then behind me there's a Spec Delta, which if you remember the Spec Alpha family, it's the same type of ID, it's just been changed in a few ways, and we'll go over all of that. Before that, this video is brought to you by the Gigabyte Z390 Aorus Master motherboard, which comes equipped with one of the more powerful Z390 VRMs for heavier overclocks on the new 9th gen Intel CPUs. The Aorus Master is also one of the few motherboards with a real heatsink this generation, featuring a mix of high surface area fins and looks-oriented cover blocks. Oh, and it's also got updated RGB illumination. Learn more at the link below. Starting with the 275Q, so let's get the price out of the way, I guess. $90, and then behind me $80 for the Spec Delta. So $90 for the 275Q. This case changes from the 275R by changing the R to a Q, which means quiet. So you could surmise then that there are going to be foam damping panels. So you've got foam on the left, on the right, and on the top, none on the front, but there's a thinner foam. So it is not the perforated kind, but it's just a flat foam, and we can test in noise testing how that performs. In terms of cooling, of course, cooling is the counterpart to noise. We talk about how that's a difficult balance, and you've probably seen some of our videos on that. But the front panel is the same as the 275R. We did a review on the 275R. It's pretty limited airflow already, but there is a front center fan. It's PWM, so that's an upgrade from the 275R, which was DC control, and then the rear fan is PWM as well. So 120 in the front center, splitting air between the CPU and GPU, which is probably for the best, so that's better positioning than we've seen from some of the other cases we've reviewed lately, and then one top rear, 120 millimeters. Now, this is a more limited airflow case to begin with, as you saw in our original review. So thermals will be more or less the same, plus or minus the delta between the fan speeds. But if you're interested in a quiet version, then of course it's worth checking out. We might review it and see how the noise performance is later. I guess few key items to note. If you didn't see the 275R review previously, there's no power supply shroud, which we actually prefer that. It does help with GPU thermals quite a bit. So no power supply shroud. They've added a PWM, a fan repeater to the backside, so you can plug in all the fans into that repeater and plug that into the motherboard via PWM rather than DC control. Hard drive cages, bottom center, or just like the 275R, and I think that's pretty much it. I will point this out though. No more Allen keys required for removing the screws in the side panel. So side panel is now switched to normal Phillips head, which is perfect and what we want to see. That's because it's not tempered glass, because the focus is quiet. So not having glass in a quiet case, probably a good move, and something that, again, several of the cases we've looked at have overlooked recently. So that's the 275Q. Pretty straightforward. We might review it. It's a 275R refreshed, which is an improved 270R in some ways. And then the Spec Delta behind me. Spec Delta is the opposite side of the spectrum in some ways, because so this one, if you remember the Spec Alpha, it kind of looks vaguely similar with the geometric shape on the front panel. It's an acrylic front panel, and there is a bit of a cutout for air on the bottom. So bottom fan has probably like 80% access to air, which is not bad. Top fan's got a little tiny vent here with some plastic bracing around it, so not a ton of you need a lot of pressure to get that top fan to do anything, and you need even more to get the middle fan to do anything. But if you're going for symmetry and RGB looks, then I guess that's what you'd get, because this does include all RGB fans for the front. It's got a blackout fan for the back, and the three front fans they're supposed to be new RGB SKU from Corsair. I don't know the details on it yet, but it does get rid of the requirement for a separate controller for the LEDs, which is good. So you can just plug them into normal fan headers into the motherboard, and they'll work just fine. But otherwise, it's got a power supply shroud. It extends all the way to the front, but there's a cutout for the radiator in the front, or the fans in the front as well. 3 120s currently, 120 in the rear. The top has a 240 radiator mounted to it. This is a competitor to Cooler Master's lower end. I think it was the Master Box, I think is the name of that case. Dust filter, of course, with a magnet on it. So pretty standard features for the most part in an $80 case. This would be competing directly with something like the NZXT H500, the Cooler Master Box cases along those lines. And if you consider it, then some of Corsair's own older cases as well. And I think the point here is basically, do you like how it looks? Because cases are going to come down to performance for some people and looks for the other. If you like how it looks, then there's nothing I can tell you that really matters. If you want performance, buy something else, like the RL06 or something similar to that. But we'll look at it more in the future, perhaps. This is entirely a looks-oriented case. If that's your thing, cool. It's here. It's a Spec Delta if you want to look it up when it comes out. So that'll wrap the cases. We'll show some B-roll of the power supply briefly. The power supply is a proper SFX power supply. It has a, I think, 93 millimeter fan on it, and that's really the main details. So I think this one is going, the one they have here is 750 watt, and if you wanted a properly small power supply, then that would be a good option to consider. There's not a ton of true SFX PSUs out there, and that would be one of them. Other than that, another small note, Corsair has gone the whiteout approach for some of its products. So the H100i 240 millimeter CLC, that now has a white variant, and it's $15 more than MSRP for the normal version. So that's it. That's the most interesting stuff that's on the component DIY side at Corsair Suite for CES 2019. Thank you for watching. Subscribe for more. As always, go to store.gamersnexus.net to help us out directly. I'll see you all next time.